when you look at adoption, there's so much that happens outside of the actual software. And one of the biggest things that I have seen is when we can really lead with the why and helping people understand what it is that where we're going and what we need to do, and then let something like the software just be a byproduct of how we're going to get there, is so much different than just starting with, here's what we're doing and we're going to jam it down your throat. We want to make sure we have a message that we're doing this for and with you, not to you. And here's why we're doing this for you and with you, and why we need to get to where we're going to be. But we do need to make sure that here's the four corners of the box. This is going to make our life a lot easier.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell
and Amy Weaver. Let's jump in first with the reason I invited you to be here, Allen. We worked together a long time ago.
10 years.
It's probably been 10 years since we've seen each other like in real life. Which is terrible. But back then I was the leader of our marketing team at Magnus Health, a little SaaS startup in Raleigh. And you held a couple of titles there, but the last one was Chief Product Officer. And I would argue you were kind of a Chief Revenue Officer, just like before that was a thing. And then since then, you co-founded some other businesses and now have transitioned to this Certified EOS Implementer. So can you give our audience a little bit of a background on you and how you came to be what you are today?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me. I think at its core, all the stuff that I've done is I learned over time that I was very much an integrator in the EOS speak. Very much that's kind of second in command. And if you look back over the things that I have done, that's pretty much the role that I've served. And after about close to 10 years of running companies on EOS, on the framework of EOS, sitting largely in that integrator seat, about 5 years ago, I transitioned over to and went and got trained and certified. And now I sit on the implementer side of the table with companies running on EOS. So I usually work with anywhere from 23, 25 companies at a time, helping them speak a common language and have all the tools to run a great business rather than having to figure out how to run a great business. And that's what kind of led me to today.
What size companies do you work with typically? Brendan was asking this and I wasn't sure.
If you define kind of a sweet spot is anywhere from 10 to 250 employees, privately held businesses is a pretty typical. I mean, it certainly works outside of that, but that is would be defined as a sweet spot.
Yeah, so that's pretty consistent what we hear. So, Al, I'm not sure if Amy shared this with you, but we've been an EOS company for a long time. But we self-implemented for the first probably 8 years and then started working with an implementer 2 years ago, which made a massive difference. So, my PSA for right now would be, if you are a company, that's currently running on EOS and you're self-implementing and you think you could maybe get a little more value, I would highly recommend working with an implementer.
I've been in that position before too, as Amy mentioned. Even in the company that we work together, we were presented with that opportunity and kind of looked at it as we probably thought we were going to spend more time and energy and ultimately money trying to figure it out on our own because ultimately you've got to get there. And we were thinking, and the mindset I talk to companies now is like, do you want to spend time thinking about how to run a great business, or do you just want to go run a great business? And you want to just be a student of the game and learn this stuff as you go, learn it the right way, learn it in the right order, and how much further and how much faster can we go? I'd peel the onion back one more layer to that too. And this is kind of an EOS creed, but EOS isn't necessarily the right fit for every business, but every business should have an operating system that they're running on. Pick one and roll with it, even if EOS is not the right one for you. But you really can't run on multiple systems. You got to get everybody speaking on that common language. So if nothing else, that's the takeaway is, and if you don't have an off the shelf one like an EOS or a scaling up or other options, you're kind of running your own homegrown system, even though you don't know it. You're trying to motivate your team. You're trying to set goals. You're trying to have a vision, and ultimately, when you're cobbling that all together, how much time and energy are you spending trying to figure it out, rather than just actually running a great business?
Yeah, I guess we could say the same thing about a CRM. Make sure you have a CRM.
Yeah.
Pick your color, and if you really have to do it on an Excel spreadsheet, then that, I guess, is some version. It's just not going to it's not going to be quite as good as having the software that can automate a lot of the things. But
or scale. It's not going to work at scale.
Right. Exactly. But the point is, you have to have something. Yeah.
So, Allen, where do you think Magnus? I mean, it certainly wasn't at its infancy as a company, but what do you think was the catalyst for deciding on an operating system?
It was a classic use case. It was around the 12 to 14 full-time employee mark, if I remember correctly. I know it was certainly between 10 and 15. And that's one of the first inflection points where you can't just cobble things together anymore. As people show up, even if everything stays the same, the organization is getting more complex, just the way that human communication works.
Mm-hmm.
There's two lines of communication between any two individuals. So as you continue to build out teams, things are going to get more complex, even if everything stays the same. That's one of the areas that we'll see. With that said, I've also specifically worked with organizations that were founded in 1905. And multi-generational family business, and because of either market circumstances and needing to change and adapt, or a new generational shift, they're like, we really haven't ever buckled down on this stuff, and we need to do that now, or we don't want to be the generation that this thing goes belly up under. We want to actually do the iterating and the change necessary to move the organization forward. So that is kind of a misconception, I think, with operating systems as a whole, is it's not necessarily a startup thing. All size, all stages of businesses could have some type of inflection point, whether they're starting to see some people issues or just throwing a lot of stuff against the wall to see what will stick. They're kind of have hit some type of ceiling, and they're trying to break through some type of ceiling. And the reality of that is that once you start using an operating system, you start speaking a common language, helps break through that ceiling. Well, guess what? There's no one ceiling. It's kind of like kids. There's growth spurts in any business. And so congratulations, you're running an organization. You just broke through a ceiling. The only reward you're going to get is there's another one coming.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Well, and if there's not, then that's a different problem. Yeah.
So bring on the ceiling.
So
that's right.
So now that you are working with lots more organizations, not just internally, what are some similarities between the ones that you think are scaling effectively versus the ones that kind of struggle to break through these ceilings?
Although this could be something that's pretty popular to be said, I think one of the big challenges as scale is happening is across all kinds of functional areas, not just in the revenue space. We take our best performers, individual contributors, and move them into management leadership roles with no management and leadership training. The actual leading and managing of teams is drastically different than being a really high performing individual contributor. And oftentimes we've even seen, when we can really get teams to be open and honest, sometimes there's a lot of relief on both sides of a tough conversation, of a critical conversation, where people return back to the individual contributor world. Let's actually see what those leadership and management capabilities or needs are. So I think that's one place that I'm sure gets talked about a lot, but the reality is we need to set people up for success and make sure they have the tools, the training, the resources necessary for that to be a logical move. I tell a lot of times now, I was a integrator for almost 10 years before I became an implementer, as I said earlier. And a lot of times I hear companies talking about, well, we're very unique and there's all these specific things to our industry and this is very complicated. And I say, hey, out of an abundance of love, I'm going to tell you something. If you give me 6 weeks in your company, I can figure all this out. I don't need to know any of that. But that doesn't have a lot of times the subject matter and the expertise. One of the things that's been just fascinating to me is, you can go from anywhere from a utility contractor to a SaaS business in the same week, and 90% of the conversation and the challenges are the exact same. And so that while there is that unique flair of what everybody does, and that probably does get complicated, and there is a lot of subject matter expertise that's needed, from a leadership and management standpoint, a lot of times it's like, how are we motivating people? Are we driving to the right decisions? Are we making decisions appropriately? Are we scaling the organization that way? And people are a large part of what we do. So ultimately, we can see between people and processes and truly adhering to those, I think are the biggest drivers that I would at least look at as trends.
Very cool.
Yeah, which is, to your point, is very consistent with RevOps too. Yeah.
Right. And then beyond that, it goes to looking at your data, being able to trust it, and then using that to make informed decisions on what technology you're going to use to empower those employees and maybe streamline those processes, hopefully streamline those processes, I guess.
I 100% agree with that. And if you go back to, if we simplify again, the RevOps, service, marketing, sales, all kind of revenue, put it under an umbrella. And you think about what are the processes, the people, the platforms, all the things that we're using and how do we simplify that? The other thing is kind of like the matrix concept a little bit is once we get great processes, once we get great people, once we have the right platforms, and a lot of times processes can be dictated through the platforms themselves. When you do this, it requires this and this requires that. And try to make it as simple to use as possible, as few mistakes as possible. The matrix concept of this is that it should all feed each other. Well, if this metric says that we're off track for the last 6 or 8 weeks, rather than just we had one bad week, now we might be heading in the direction of needing to change a process or think about how we're doing something differently in one of our systems. Now our system kind of breaks in one way. Well, does that help us understand we need, they're all interconnected in a way that once our leaders can start seeing how all of those things are rowing in the same direction and trying to actually make our life easier to get done what we need to get done, that's where we can really start seeing, I think, some drastic improvements and go a lot further and go a lot faster.
What are some mistakes that you're finding organizations can make when they're going through this process with you?
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I mean, get started yesterday. When you think about it, if you have two axes, one's time and one's change, and over time, if you make incremental changes, you're going to get to the end of that graph and you're going to be in a much different place than you are today. If you wait 6 months, then you're going to be that much further behind. I do see that as a mistake. I see getting really overcomplicating the decision-making process. So we always kind of joke, if you look at red, yellow, and green, I would ask a team, what's the color of hell, red, yellow, or green? Start green. Who thinks the color of hell is green? Nobody. Who thinks the color of hell is yellow? Nobody. Who thinks the color of hell is red? No. Everybody raises their hand, right? Well, the color of hell is yellow. We need a hell yes or a hell no, but we can't have hell maybe. That's hell. And so how do we get ourselves motivated and understanding, a bad decision, because we're going to surround ourselves with talented people. We want to have people that share our values and are going to see the direction of where we're heading. So when we make an assumption that we've got great people around us, bad decisions are not going to be catastrophic. They're going to be like, we got it 80, 85% right. We can train that last 10, 15% the next time and make sure we don't make that mistake again. And then the last huge mistake is it's a challenge with any organization that's growing, because everybody kind of thinks that it, this is my baby kind of concept, is just let go of the vine. Start delegating. We got to delegate and elevate. I want to know, what is your unique ability you bring to this organization, and why can't we have more of your time doing that? I had a CEO of a hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars organization, and we uncovered that Tuesday through Friday every week he spends about an hour to go get the mail. I was like, that door is locked, and before we leave today, that door will not be unlocked until you agree you're no longer going to do that. But not because oftentimes people do this totally with the good intentions of, I just don't want someone else to have to do this, or I've done it for a long time. Hey, every now and then there's a big check in there and I like seeing it, but that doesn't mean that that's where this team needs your time being used. So making sure we really are properly delegating to elevate not only yourself, but the team is something that people just hold on to. Again, not for wrong, bad intentions, but we got to help people see that. And help people need to raise their hand and help each other too, is one area that I've really found. Hey, Amy, I got it. Let go of the vine. You're like, okay, I trust you. But sometimes we need that reinforcement from others.
Oh my God. I know I can think specifically of a time when you did this to me and I hated you for it at the time. We were going to implement HubSpot. This was late 2011, had to be beginning of 2012. And you wanted me to negotiate the pricing with a rep. You're like, no, don't take that first price. Go back and say, look, we're a startup. We're like really strapped for cash. Like, what can you do? End of the quarter is coming up. What can you do? And I'm like, I can't have that conversation. What are you getting? Like, I could have killed you.
How'd you do?
But it did make me feel good that you thought I could handle it, and I got us a better deal. So
it's a great point, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
This goes back to kind of the leadership and management aspects of it too, and I think this is a great, fun, open, and honest conversation. Amy will tell you just as quickly as I will. We had some hard conversations too, right? But I always would challenge people that I know and I believe in, to say, look, we've got to get our relationship to where if I'm about to make some bonehead move, I want you to pull me in that conference room. You can cuss me out. You can tell me whatever you need. And I think you'll still confirm this. When she did that, when other people that I counted on did that, I'm going to give them a hug. I'm going to thank them. I'm going to tell them, hey, I might need tonight to think about it, but you're right. Yeah, let's figure out how to make this work. And when you start helping people understand that you believe in them, it's not just that you trust them, but you believe. Why are you going to do this? Because that's a skill that I want you to put on your on your resume, because that's I need to be able to count on you for those kinds of things. I think that's really important, and oftentimes that's more leadership to me than holding things and trying to be the bottleneck and the gatekeeper of like, well, that's all got to go through me. And I don't know if that's a confidence thing with leaders these days, that think that, that creates some kind of leverage, which, think about that word in itself. That's a terrible word if you're thinking about being a leader, manager in an organization. You want quite the opposite. I mean, I teach teams this now. I say, if I had 2 hours after practice and I could go to the gym and I'm a basketball player and I've got 2 hours every day, I'm going to shoot free throws. I'm going to shoot 1,000 free throws after practice is over, 1,000 more than anybody. And I'm going to take my free throw percentage from 82 or 83% up to like 91, 92%. I'll be one of the top free throw shooters in the country. But at the end of the game, the opposing team knows that they're not going to foul me. They're going to foul any of the other four players on the court because they're shooting 60, 65, 70% from the line. I want you to take those 2 hours that you got that you can go to the gym. I want you to invest it in the other four starters on the team. I want everybody to shoot 80% from the line. I might shoot 82, 83% from the line, but if my other teammates can shoot 80% from the line, you can't foul any of us at the end of the game. all we got to do is get the ball in bounds. We're all going to make that shot.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that from a business standpoint, it's really powerful that from leadership and management, let's reinvest in the team. I should be judged if I'm a leader by the outcomes of the teams that I lead, and I can't do that alone. That's why, I wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
there wouldn't be any people if you could do it all alone. So that mindset shift. And I think all this is hugely applicable just in the RevOps world, because I just look at that as like all of that leadership management's required to run a great revenue operation. The revenue operation is just probably the one that has the most clear data and measurables and things that is so black and white. Like, let's embrace that, let's live into it, and let's go crush it.
Well, and it's your customer-facing teams that we're talking about. So the customer is on the receiving end of these people who are motivated and empowered and, really excelling in their roles. So they're going to appreciate that too.
100%.
Improve the customer experience. Yeah. And I like the basketball analogy, because
you've been keeping up with the Minnesota Timberwolves, Alan.
Well, if you think about it, that was, I don't follow basketball much as you do apparently, but because where I grew up, it wasn't that big a sport. But of course, when the Timberwolves are in the playoffs, I'm going to be watching.
Everybody's got to care now.
Yeah. And on Sunday night, they beat the Nuggets for the exact reason that you just gave. And again, myself not really knowing basketball, I came out on Monday and was saying to a few of the guys who were like totally into it, I'm like, that they won because they played as a team. The points were spread across all the players in the team, whereas the Nuggets, that 80% of their points were scored by two players. It's gonna get you in the end.
At some point, that's going to break down. And what that, if you translate that in the business world, often what that means is we are kind of masking behind maybe we have a people issue or something that we need to deal with. And really comes from a delegation standpoint. When you're leading, there's really two big delegation challenges. One is we just literally don't have anybody to delegate to. There's not the resource there. Like, that's like a hiring decision or resource allocation. The team's growing, we're scaling. Back to one of your original questions, Amy, and do we have the processes, the systems in place that help us better proactively predict that it's time to hire so we can offload those things? The second one is one we really have to watch out for more, which is we actually have the person, we have the role. We're just unwilling to actually delegate to them because there's not a trust. There's not the trust. There's not the thought that it's actually going to get done. And that's probably more of a people issue than it is a delegation issue. And, A players want to surround themselves with A players. And ultimately, as leaders and as managers, the one difference, I'll let the cat out of the bag here, is that, we're just expected to make decisions. Everybody else can see the same things that we can. If there's someone that's underperforming or system that's underperforming, a process that's underperforming, everybody else sees it too. It's just a leader's job is to actually do something about it.
What are some other Magnus stories that we can come back to tie into whether it's challenges with growing headcount or this could be a good direction to go, like keeping the teams aligned as you're growing and adding people? What do you remember about when we had some of those rougher patches?
I think speaking specifically to the keeping teams aligned, it's remarkable how internally how often things can go so far apart when we're saying the same thing. When you think about clarity, there's some tools here, but oftentimes we start with facts, and those facts we then create kind of stories in our mind based on the facts. The stories lead us to how we feel about what's happening, and then ultimately it sets expectations. But the interesting thing here is you go back to the facts, even internally in a team, we're aligning around, hey, these are the same facts, but this is actually the way that I see it, and this is the way that you see it. So we don't even start by truly aligning around the facts. And in what you're speaking to in our experience together, classic example is kind of you've got a customer success, customer support team, implementation team, and you've got a software engineering team. And we've got customers saying that the way that something's not working well, and they're taking this on the front lines every day. Well, I wish it did this or it should have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we're trying to say, hey, go back to our engineering team. And internally, we're kind of having this strife or debate on whether this is a new feature request or this is a bug or this is, and what we need to be doing is saying, hey, guys, we're on the same team here. It doesn't really matter. We can retrospectively go back and look at that. The reality is, even if we had every spec right and it was coded exactly to the spec, and now we put it out to the market, we got it a little wrong. Now we need to align together and fix the challenge on behalf of the client, but then also go back retrospectively and think about, well, how are we going to make sure that we do this better next time? Where did things slip through the cracks? And any cross-functional, cross-departmental kind of issue in organizations has the opportunity for it to be come back to that. Are we aligning around what we actually think the facts are to start moving forward?
Yeah. Were there any circumstances of implementing technology and not getting the adoption that we'd hoped for? I sort of have one in mind.
Shoot.
And I'm wondering if you remember it the same way. We got a sales director that was very vocal about implementing Salesforce. And I don't know that it went super smoothly. I don't know how you felt about it at the time.
Adoption certainly is everything. It's interesting to think back. So this is probably a circa 2010, 11-ish timeframe at this point. And the decision back then, Salesforce and HubSpot were very different tools. HubSpot was very much.
Oh, yeah. They weren't even in the same. Yeah, they weren't even in the same universe. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be very common that you'd have an integration between Salesforce and HubSpot. HubSpot for marketing automation, Salesforce, coming out of the gate as very much the CRM tool, whereas it's probably much more of a head-to-head decision. Although there are teams that still use both too, and there's totally use cases for that. The reason that I'm pointing that out is it was also back to we're adding one more tool to the suite kind of conversation, which is still relevant today. Not just in the CRM world, but as you add Slack and everything, it's like, there's the timeless debate of can we put everything in one place, or is there just these specific things that work great for specific things? And it's always a challenge. I think that when you look at adoption, there's so much that happens outside of the actual software. And one of the biggest things that I have seen is when we can really lead with the why and helping people understand what it is where we're going and what we need to do, and then let something like the software just be a byproduct of how we're going to get there, is so much different than just starting with, here's what we're doing and we're going to jam it down your throat. We want to make sure we have a message that we're doing this for and with you, not to you. And here's why we're doing this for you and with you, and why we need to get to where we're going to be. But we do need to make sure that here's the four corners of the box. This is going to make our life a lot easier. So hopefully that speaks to it directly. I do remember exactly what you're saying, and that was probably the other factor that's worth throwing in is not only was it a move to Salesforce, but it was probably a move from Zoho to Pipedrive to Capsule CRM to this, and it's like Sugar CRM for sure, and it's also the here we go again. That you have to really make sure you're very strategic and intentional. Whether it's this situation or anything in a growing organization, the way I like to look back is to say, look, so whether it's this software, this process, the system, let's give a little bit of credit that 2 or 3 years ago when we made this decision, There were probably some things limiting why we made the decision. There were reasons. There were smart people around the table. So rather than all having the mindset now of saying, all right, well, here we go again. We got to change something. We've got to add something new. Rather than saying there was a bunch of boneheads and this was a dumb decision, why don't we look at it and say, let's respect and applaud the fact that these decisions and these systems got us 4 years down the road. But at the same time, know and acknowledge that they're not going to get us to the future. Starting with the leaders that made, hey, I fully embrace that too. I'm glad y'all are poking holes in this now. Can't you see that we've grown revenue 4 times what it was when we started with this? Absolutely, we're going to outgrow it. Absolutely, there's some duct tape and strings right now, and let's applaud that. Let's respect it, and let's say that the reason that we're here is because decisions like this actually allowed us to get to this point. Now let's align around how we can even get better and move faster.
Yeah, I knew I could count on you for a positive outlook on that.
It's always half full.
The why is really critical in explaining both the past, why did things before and why you're making that change now, and how everybody benefits. And one of the big focuses for us this year, kind of our theme for the year at Dynamico, in fact, is all around. Well, it's very much around what you've said already a number of times, around progress, not perfection. But it's also, now I forgot what I was going to say for the second point. But
well, you know that progress, not perfection, kills me. But it's it's making me better to go through this process of making the podcast and doing the thing and making it better as
doing
we go.
The uncomfortable work that's necessary. Yeah. Anyway, it'll come back to me.
When you think about progress over perfection and you think about motivating people and stepping out of your comfort zone, Brene Brown kind of nails it here too. I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and she says that clear is kind and unclear is unkind. I mean, how cool is that? It's like you don't have to be, you don't have to deliver potentially even bad news or potential improvement in a negative way. You don't have to be rude about it. You just need to be clear. And if we can take that mindset of progress over perfection, we can make sure we're being clear with each other. The reality is so many teams need to become more open and honest with each other and just more cohesive, because quite frankly, they're not. And when they are, all of these other things around aligning with tools and software changes and process changes, even we can't rule by consensus, but we want everybody to have participated, to make sure that their voice has been heard in a way that when we have kind of, what I would refer to and we talk about as healthy conflict in organizations, which organizations crave that. They crave having healthy conflict because if one of us could just make all the decisions, great. But that's, we have all these unique perspectives and ways that we view our organizations and how we can improve. And when we all lean into those tough conversations, we're going to get so much better of a result than trying to have some kind of dictatorship.
Yeah, but also if you're not having conflict, you're most likely not pushing hard enough to reaching whatever your goals are for whether it's the quarter or the year or whatever it is.
Yeah, and hey, so sales is a perfect example. We're going to go out and celebrate that this quarter 95% of our contracts are won. Time to increase your price. There's some good and bad in that. Like, let's again go back to the data, make sure we understand what it's telling us. But that's we don't want to be in the total fish shooting fish in a barrel kind of world. We want to make sure that we're properly valued in the market. Yeah,
especially as a services business. Amy, that's actually a good one to include in our discussion with Casey, right?
That's a great tee up for her next week. Yeah, we're talking to a pricing strategist pro next week.
Yeah, that's a really good
You're
one.
welcome, Casey.
That's really good.
I love this thing that I heard yesterday for the first time, and I was kind of shocked that I hadn't heard it before. That all leadership is temporary. Have you heard that before, Alan?
I hadn't heard it in those terms, but I can get behind that.
Yeah, because it was around a sort of a delegate and elevate conversation. And my friend John Rodriguez, who said this, he was going into, and again, it was an EOS type conversation because the person who'd raised the issue is an EOS company, and so she was using all the terms that you would use, and he just was explaining to her how this was going to work, and he just sort of fleetingly said, and all leadership is temporary, and I'm like, that's brilliant, because and in fact, I heard an example of that just this morning, where this is how AI is going to change, what we're doing as leaders, but more of us are going to becoming leaders or managers, because we're going to be managing, instead of managing more people, we're going to be managing our AI that's going to be helping us do our job better, which again means that what we're doing, today or next week or this month from a leadership perspective is different to what it's going to be next month or next year. And if it's not, then we're not pushing hard enough, or we're not growing as an individual, as a professional. So I was just wondering whether you'd heard that one before, because I think it fits really well in that delegate and elevate conversation.
Well, it can directly relate to something I do talk to teams a lot about, and that is growth lives right on the other side of fear and change. So let's buckle up and let's just get better at that, and let's lean into some tough conversations when call each other out on that, but do it in a way that that we're all in this together. It's not personal attacks. It's that we need to grow and lean in and be a little uncomfortable, and really we'll see that it's not that bad.
Actually, I heard another good explanation recently for what you were talking about earlier, where when someone who has really high value things that they could be doing, but they're instead going to get the mail, which takes them 4 hours a week, a really good way to present that, which in fact if you think about it, is a really data-driven way, is have the conversation with them and say, well, if you could get 4 hours a week back, or multiply that by the weeks in the year, so 50 times 4 is what, 200 hours a year. How could you use those 200 hours a year, to a higher value for the business?
100%.
So you take it from, instead of saying just, it's always more powerful when you say, well, stop doing that. Instead of saying stop doing that and start doing this, because that's all people really need, because it's often fear, right, that is keeping them doing that. So if you tell them what to start doing instead of just stop doing, it's much easier for them to make that shift.
Yeah, and that's definitely a decision more in fear and scarcity than we speak in EOS a lot about love and abundance. If we're abundance minded, we're doing this with love, and sometimes love is delivering some tough news to somebody. Hey man,
Yep.
we do need you to stop getting the mail, but it's because we also at the same time hear, let's say it's let's go back to sales, and I'm not getting enough time to do this, but I love this, or I'm great at it. We also, well, you're better at that than anybody in the organization. What if we could have 10, 20, 30% more of your time doing that? Sign me up. Like, I'm selfishly going to be in a better place. You're going to be in a better place. We're going to be in a better place if we can get us all aligned and making sure that that's where we're spending our time and energy.
Which I think actually speaks directly. I've seen this many times myself, to an example you gave earlier about when people go from being an individual contributor to being put in the position of a manager or a leader when they're not really ready because they haven't been trained to do that. And then, in fact, if they have a really good leader, that leader will manage them back to becoming an individual contributor because they're so good at doing that thing. But often people have to try things for themselves and before they can realize it, and not everybody's open to the coaching to go through that process because they were doing it potentially because they thought that was what more success looks like. But in fact, coming back to the unique ability that we all have, that's not always the case. Some of us are just better at being individual contributors than we are to being leaders or managers.
Yeah, and the reality of a lot of those decisions are that it's we haven't done a great job in organizations of showing career pathing that potentially, and so in other words, that there's a perception that if I move into leadership and management, there's additional compensation, and that's kind of that's the track that I should be on. I did this, now I should do this.
Yeah.
And that's not always often the case. It's very different things.
Yeah. And of course, it's even more difficult in those, smaller companies, up to 20, 30 people. It's really hard to have a clear, career path. So there's got to be a lot more trust.
Or one of our previous guests was saying, no one has ever retired from a career in social media. This was a gal who's the head of growth at a social media agency. And I had never considered that before. But if it's not a traditional career path that's kind of laid out before you, of first you do this role and then you transition to this and then you lead a team of people who are doing this, then what can that look like?
Yeah. And I guess AI will be the next thing, right? I mean, how do you retire from AI? I mean, it's just, it's never going to happen if that's, your role in the business. But
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of dialogue around it right now. There's a lot of what ifs. I can admit probably a weakness that I don't do well in the what if worlds. I kind of like more of the here and now. What can we control and what can we get better at? But if nothing else, I think there's an agreement that there will still be a lot of opportunity for people that just know how to use AI very well. I don't think it will go take over and conquer the world. If so, then none of us will be here. So who cares? I'm the type person that I'm not going to have my underground storage bunker for the Armageddon, because if I'll just take me out at that point, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which again, it comes back to the mindset, right? It's one of abundance versus scarcity, and I guess, well, I mean, Amy's probably heard me say this once too many times, but I say, today is better than yesterday and tomorrow will be better than today. And a lot of that is because of technology. And of course, right now, more specifically AI, but I truly believe that.
I agree there. That's good.
Amy, what else do we have for Allen?
Do you have any advice for folks who are reaching an inflection point? Let's say that where they're debating, do we need an operating system? Do we need some sort of process in place to move forward and to scale efficiently? Do you have advice for who the stakeholders are that need to be having those conversations, or what do they need to be asking one another to, move forward, I guess? Well,
it certainly is the type thing that has to start, fortunately or unfortunately, a little bit of a top down with all the critical stakeholders. The biggest flaw that I've seen is that if there's not buy-in in the room, it's not going to work. It's not worth the investment of the time and energy and capital, human capital and money to do it. But at the same time, hopefully people can look inward a little bit and say, God, what if we just got out of our own way? This is actually a great compliment to the team. If we just got out of our own way a little bit, if we just had a little bit more structure, a little bit more discipline, a little bit more consistency, if we were all, on the same sheet of music, if we really were rowing in the same direction, if all of our human energy was pointing in the same direction, man, how much better would that feel? And at that point, it's more just giving in and embracing the process, the framework, and letting it guide you. I ultimately think of it as with the teams that I do work with. I tell them all the time, our job is to, at the end of the day, for you to have 100% transparency of what's going on in your organization via this process, via this framework. But in my case, EOS, incapable of making a hard decision. It's not able to do that. you've got to do that. You've got to lean in and embrace that. And, sometimes, especially in the kind of high growth world, the other kind of check our ego at the door moment is sometimes as we get on the same sheet of music and we're seeing what customers are telling us, maybe it's not exactly what we thought it was going to be. Maybe it requires a little bit of a pivot or a little bit of a change. And one real unfortunate thing is to see teams kind of drive that, no, this is who we are. This is what we deliver to the market. This is what the world wants, when the world's telling us it needs something a little bit different. But the transparency around having the open and honest conversations, around collecting the data, around having the right processes is telling us something a little bit different. I want to give the teams the ability to kind of choose courage over comfort there. Let's go and make sure that on the other side of fear is the growth that we're looking for, and let's go tackle it.
So would the One Health record switch to the student health record be an example of that happening?
Oh, 100%. Magnus was the product of a huge pivot and an absolute gut-wrenching check your ego at the door. You kind of got this wrong, but you got an opportunity to salvage it in a very positive way.
So I think that happened pretty shortly before I joined.
Yeah, that's right.
So Magnus, when I worked there, was a student health record, and our target audience was private schools mostly, who were collecting student health data and then storing it in this HIPAA compliant way. But prior to that, Allen, how would you describe how you guys came to market? Yeah,
the original concept was it's going to be more of a personal health record. This is back in, if you can rewind back to 2007, 2006, 2007, Google Health, Microsoft Health Vault were products. This is before Obama's in office. There's some talk as interesting as socialized medicine, and there's going to be chips in our elbows before you know it, all this kind of stuff. And then 2007, 2008 hits, recession, and we happen to have a school come to us and say, based on the way that this system works, where you are going to collect information for individuals so that their doctors could collaborate in their care, we have the same kind of challenge for our students in our schools, where we need the nurse to collaborate, we need parents to collaborate, we need to have things off campus in an emergency. It seems like that this could work for us. And between us friends here on the podcast, behind the scenes, we're kind of like, well, will you pay us for it? And they're like, yeah.
How much are we talking about
yeah,
here?
There's value here. We're like, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Obviously, generalized and being a little sarcastic, but fast forward 9 to 12 months later, and we had signed up over 200 school programs, and we had totally pivoted into a new business model altogether. Now, the point here would have been, we could have very easily said, we're going to keep driving, and we had this idea, we're going to make it work, but we had some tough conversations and kind of check your ego, and this is probably in the best interest of the organization, and it proved to be a really good decision in the long run for us. So,
Allen, of the the 6 areas within EOS, and I guess we could maybe sort of skip traction, even though that's ultimately where we all want to get to. But if you look across, so you're sort of rotating, 20 to 25 clients that you're working with at any one time over the last, has it been 5 years, you say? So you've probably, over that time, you've probably worked with maybe 50 or more.
That's right.
Clients. Where do you see the most common challenges in your sort of annual and quarterly meetings? In which of those areas is it people? Is it data? Is it process? Where do you see the most sort of repeat issues come up?
It certainly ebbs and flows, and every organization is a little different. However, there is a big theme. The most painful things come back to people. I will say a couple things that are very positive, because when I think there's a misconception here when I say that immediately that goes to, okay, well, we got to clean the house, we got to fire everybody, we got to start, and that's not it at all. Oftentimes, I'm able to help teams realize that they've actually surrounded themselves with great people. They've just done a really poor job of telling them what they're accountable for. who's accountable for what and why, and really aligning around accountability and responsibility. Accountability and responsibility are very different to me. One person, only one person can be accountable. Many people can be responsible. Okay. But if two people are accountable, nobody's accountable. So how do we truly make sure everybody understands what you're accountable for, what you're responsible for, align the team around the structure that we need to make the organization be successful, and then we need to go do those things and go conquer the world, make our little dent in the world. So what if you could just make one strong people move every quarter? Think about how different that would feel for a department, for a team, for a leadership team, a year from now, 12 months, 18 months from now. And a strong people move doesn't, again, mean that you have to terminate somebody. It means you could promote somebody. It means you could recruit somebody externally that's a great fit for the organization. It means we might have somebody internal to the organization that we've gotten a totally wrong role that we put in the right role, and they just totally flourish in that. All of those are strong people moves. And so if we can commit to making sure we have made it very clear what success looks like, what the expectations are, then we just go make sure that they're meeting or exceeding those expectations. That's how we can really start rolling in the same direction. And then process would probably be the next most common. And the message I would want to send on process is it's just more fun to run a business that's process driven. It really is. When you can look around and you can see that everybody's doing things the same way. Now, we live by the rule of 20% documentation to get 80% of the results. I'm not entrepreneurial operating system. Entrepreneurial is in there for a reason. I don't want an 800-page manual that nobody's going to read. I want the non-negotiables. And you know what? The last 20%, my job is to surround you with great people. So go get it done. You'll figure out how to get it done. And ultimately, if we can align around, let's say the customer experience comes first and we want to wow the customer with a great experience, well, make that last 20%, whatever you need to do to deliver the great experience, but you followed all the steps to get there. I'll get on a plane to California tomorrow and support that if I have to with one of the clients that we're supporting. So lean in. Teams often still, even in the process, 6 months, a year down, yeah, we did that process. All right, show it to me. Like, what do you mean show it to you? Like, where's it documented? Well, no, we like, people sit over my shoulder for 2 days and then they learn the process. Well, that's like a game of telephone, by the time that it gets down to all the individual contributors and everybody's doing things a little bit differently. Truly document your processes. I promise you, it'll be more fun to run an organization when you can look around and be like, golly, that's exactly the way that we want to do it. It's because we're following our process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gives more confidence to the end users, to the customers too, as well. Man, these people are sharp. They know their stuff, but it seems like they're really guiding us through, or, that's an external version of a process. And internally, even as new contributors are coming on, we're onboarding new people, same thing. Hey, honey, how was your day today? God, it was great. It seems like these people got their act together, like, wow, the first week's filled out, the next month's filled out, and I'm learning stuff, and they seem like they're really aligned around what it takes to get this job done. I'm liking what I'm hearing so far.
We often talk about that example when it comes to, you cannot provide the best customer experience until you have the best employee experience. And that same person who comes home and says, hey, honey, this was awesome, at the Sunday barbecue or wherever they get together with their friends, where ultimately everyone starts talking about how things at work. The person who says, "Oh, it's amazing. I've got the processes are awesome." They're not saying it in these terms, obviously, but and I have all the tools I need to do my job properly. The people listening who don't have that are going, "Oh my God, my job sucks. I need to look for another job." To me, those are real examples of what happens and why people, are looking for a new place to work.
I think one thing to add on to that too with process that I see as a challenge is that oftentimes it gets punted or it's on people's to-do list. Specifically speaking of leaders, feel like that it's their job to write and document all these processes. Bring in your individual contributors. Bring in the team members that are doing this all day, every day. Let them draft the first versions. Yep. And leaders are often great at taking something from 80% to 100%. But these are great opportunities to start, again, embracing folks and telling them, here's why we need to do this. And I'm leaning on you to help us get to where this is going to be more standardized, not only for you, but for the next person that comes. I need your help here. I need you to lean in on that. And if you think oftentimes leaders are the ones that have made hiring decisions. So, support your hiring decision and give them the opportunity to really thrive in the environment. I guess for me, it was fun and rewarding to see that, but a lot of people hold on to, they're not ready for that. They're not ready for that. Well, then do we have a people issue, or do we're holding on and have a control issue? Let's let them try to thrive. Because if I know that I'm, can embrace and be empowered to do something as an individual contributor, man, that makes me feel a lot better than just sitting here and kind of, checking check boxes all day.
Yeah. And that's actually that's probably the one word of advice that I give folks that I meet who are self-implementing or are looking at starting with the EOS, but are looking at self-implementing. One of the things that we probably wasted a lot of time, going back to your curve of, change and time, that we would have been further ahead if we'd done it earlier. When it came to process, is I think companies that are self-implementing, the quickest way to find out is to say, well, how many core processes do you have in your business? And they'll go, what? I'm like, yeah, so we have 11 core processes in our business, which again, we figured out 8 years later than we should have, but now we have them. Is because how do you because if you know that if they don't know how many core processes they have, clearly they don't have the other process. They don't have their processes for marketing or sales or anything else. If they don't actually know how many core processes they have to run their business, because anyway, that's kind of the one question I always ask. And if you don't know what your core processes are and therefore how many you have, then you're probably not doing the work to make sure you actually know what each one is, even if you're using the 2080 rule, which I can highly recommend because it's so much easier to start with 20% and then iterate over time.
Yeah, and the thing you're hitting on here, and this might be a kind of way to wrap a lot of this stuff up, is whether we're talking RevOps, whether we're talking an EOS or an operating system, whether you're talking a HubSpot or a automation or CRM system, all of these things are great decisions. But at the end of the day, we got to do the work. Yeah. HubSpot's great if you set it up right. EOS is great if you build your core processes and all the things that it tells you to do. All of these things are great if we lean in and do the work. And sometimes we find ourselves just sitting around the table talking kind of in circles or beating a dead horse when, hey, I need to be able to help a team step back and take the 20,000, 30,000 foot look and say, just do the work. Like, none of these, you can't write a check to HubSpot. You can't write a check to an implementer. You can't write a check and just, all right, problem solved. Like, no, go do the work. Lean in and embrace the suck.
Oh my God.
And that's how we're going to get better at where we are and get to the other side of fear with growth.
Allen, thanks so much for saying that, because whenever I say that, embrace the suck around here, for some reason, people don't like it. But...
John Bonini told me to do that.
Oh, he did?
Right?
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yes. John Bonini is our strategic genius behind relaunching the podcast. And he told me, this is probably going to feel pretty sucky for the first little bit, but just embrace it. Embrace
do the uncomfortable work,
sure.
as they say. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Allen, thanks so much. It was so great to meet you and good to have you on the podcast.
Likewise, Brendan, Amy, always, as I've told her, and I'll share with everyone else, you have my unconditional loyalty. So thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Allen.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.